Hello, everybody. Welcome to our sixth and final session in Diabetes Boot Camp. This session will deal all about problem solving. My name again is John Vredenberg. I am a diabetes educator in the UF Health Jacksonville Employee Wellness Office. So we welcome those of you in Gainesville and Jacksonville and all parts throughout the UF Health community to our last session in our diabetes boot camp. This one's going to operate a little differently. I know I do most of the talking in these programs, but this one I'm going to put you guys to the test. You don't have to speak up, but we are going to try to solve problems together. So I want you to grab a sheet of paper or get your hands near your keyboard when I call on you guys for some input. Whether you're tuning in live or listening to the recording, we're going to look at several problem scenarios and try to solve them together. I'll give you a few moments to give some thought to the problems as we get to that section of today's lesson. But again, I want to make sure you understand I'm going to help you navigate them as well. So a little bit more interactive, but again, I'm not going to put anyone on the spot. I'm not going to call on you by name and not ask you to turn your camera on if you don't want to, but really just to let you know that to get the most benefit out of this particular session, it's going to require you to put on some thinking caps and take a close look at some common diabetes problems. And when we look at problem solving, it requires a good foundation of knowledge. So everything that we've done up to this point, whether it's looking at medications, looking at nutrition, looking at physical activity, all of those pieces of information go into problem solving. But when we look at it from a broader scale, problem solving for diabetes is just like problem solving plumbing at your house or your car or anything that's going on in your life. You have to identify what that problem is and find the solution and take action. And then with diabetes, we need to assess the impact of that solution so we can learn. So you've all heard the expression that experience is one of the best teachers, and nowhere is that more common than with diabetes. So a lot of us will find ourselves in positions where maybe we have a frequent high blood sugar reading at certain times of the day, or our blood sugar drops too low, or we're having difficulty with certain types of food choices or medication side effects. And we learn from experience how those solutions can best work for us. And with diabetes, the thing to keep in mind here, and for many of our problem scenarios that we'll navigate together, is that there's often multiple solutions. It's all about trying to find what's the right solution for you. If we look at problem solving in a step-by-step basis, we can expand it even further when we look at, problem and solution generation and barrier identification and implementation and evaluation. But I really try to use the more simplified approach when it comes to problem solving. And that is, again, just identifying what is the main issue, what are some ways we could possibly solve it based on what we've learned up to this point, and taking action to see how that solution works. And if that particular solution doesn't give you the results you're looking for, we'll go back to the drawing board. And that drawing board could be trying something else in your toolbox or reaching back out to your diabetes care provider to see what might work best for you. So let's take a closer look at each of those problem solving steps, those three critical steps. And as always, anytime there's something that doesn't make sense, you can type it in the chat or you can email me directly. I've got my contact information that I will share with you. Want to make sure that you have access to the information you need to help you with your specific diabetes problem. So first things first, we identify a problem by trying to figure out, okay, well, what triggered this problem? What's actually changed? Has your medication been adjusted? Are you eating a different type of food than you normally do? What about your schedule? Maybe you're waking up earlier, going to bed later, and that has had some type of unforeseen problem. Maybe your family situation has changed and you're trying to take on the role of a dual caregiver where you're kind of part of that sandwich generation where you're taking care of your kids as well as your parents, and that has impacted your diabetes care. Or maybe, insurance has changed. I know for me, sometimes we get information about certain medications that are no longer covered under the formulary or new medications that are added, and that can impact our diabetes care. So trying to figure out when we identify a problem, what has changed or maybe what's going to change. Maybe you're going to be traveling abroad and crossing several time zones, and that'll impact how your insulin might work or the scheduling of your injections. Maybe you're going to be heading to the holidays and your exercise routine, if you had one, is going to go kind of out the window temporarily. So really, diabetes problem solving, just like anything in life, is trying to anticipate what's changing and how we can navigate through it. And as I said before, experience is often the best teacher. What have you done previously to get through some of those problems as it relates to diabetes care, and keep a log of what actually is working, not a detailed written log, but just in your mind know that, okay, I noticed when I have pizza, my blood sugar level is elevated the next morning. So how can I solve this problem? Well, maybe I can take a look at the portion size of pizza that I'm consuming, or maybe I can adjust my insulin dose if I'm taking insulin to accommodate some of that increase in blood sugar levels. Now, anytime we talk about solutions, especially as it relates to medication, we always want to defer to our diabetes care team. They are an indispensable source of advice and guidance for you when it comes to trying to navigate solutions about diabetes, especially as it relates to medication. We don't want you self-medicating with increases or decreases any of those diabetes medicines without guidance from your healthcare team. But it's also important to understand, for me as a practitioner, being on both sides of that diabetes education table, sometimes as a patient, but in this particular situation as a caregiver, I want to know what issues you're experiencing. Are there other things that are going on that might be impacting the best solution for you? So it's important for you to share those issues, to open up as to what might actually be going on. So, you know what, John, I'm having a tough time being, diligent with my blood sugar monitoring because I don't like the copay that we have for our test strips. And then as a caregiver, it's like, well, we do have a pretty beneficial no-cost test strip program under Gator Care. So again, I can help you troubleshoot some of those issues, but only if you tell me what's going on, or if you tell your diabetes caregiver and healthcare provider what is going on. So don't be shy when it comes to sharing any of those issues that you're experiencing, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional, whether it's physical. We are here to help, but only if we also understand the entire situation. And I can provide tons of ideas, but I want you to ask for them. So I'm not just counseling for the sake of counseling, because I want to try to make sure that these messages are getting across to you. And typically, if I'm just telling you what to do, it's not going to implement the same way, because you have to ask for that information for it to have meaning. And that's where we get to the action part, looking at, okay, what is going to be a realistic action plan for this scenario? Are we looking at something where your blood sugar is dropping because of increased physical activity? So we look at some of the choices. Maybe it's a matter of having a snack before that physical activity. Maybe it's a matter of adjusting the medication dose if you're on insulin, or maybe it's a matter of adjusting the timetable of that exercise class if it's coinciding with a period where you're not eating much. So when we look at taking action, understand that with many problems with diabetes, we look at multiple solutions and we may not get it right the first time. So this is where we look back at a lot of those solutions to see, okay, what worked, what didn't work, and try to troubleshoot. But most importantly, be patient with yourself. Be patient with yourself and understand that every day is going to be a new experience with you and your diabetes. And some days your blood sugar levels might be outside of that target range longer than you desired. And some days they'll be more within that target range. But it's all about trying to understand, okay, well, what's going on? What is the problem? Why is it occurring? What am I going to do about it? and then evaluate it. We don't want to ignore these problems because unfortunately, if we ignore the problem and it triggers increases in our blood sugar over a long period of time, that's where the complications can occur. Remember, high blood sugar doesn't really hurt, but over a long period of time, it does break down our blood vessels, and that's where we see those nasty complications that we talked about before. So more important than anything in this slide here is just be patient with yourself. Diabetes, there's lots of things going on, and I want you to really take good care of yourself in terms of your emotional care and understand that every day is going to be something new, a new adventure for your diabetes care. So let's take a more expanded approach with problem solving, but I'm going to key in on still what are the three key areas when we look at identifying a problem, finding a solution, and taking action. And this is a situation that can occur quite frequently when we look at diabetes care in a clinic setting. So again, this is a pretty big table. So, take a step back and don't get overwhelmed at it and just navigate it with me as we look through it. So here in this particular patient example, we've got a person whose A1C level is too high. So we look at, what are some of the barriers there? Well, I don't exercise. I have no time. Okay, so does that ring a bell with anyone else? That's a common barrier when we look at elevated A1C levels. So what are some solutions? So what are some of the possible ways to solve this problem of not exercising? Well, we look at the weekend. I have time on the weekends. I could ask my husband or wife to pick up the kids 2 days a week. So again, got some ideas, got the brain working, trying to brainstorm some potential ideas. So we implement those ideas and talk to my husband and see about the schedule. If he's not available, maybe I'll ask someone else to babysit. Or maybe I'll take a walk on Sunday afternoon. And if it's raining, I'll go to the pool. Okay, so now it's time to take that walk. Here's the implementation part. And I need to get off the phone and we need to evaluate. So in this particular example, this person didn't ask the neighbor to watch the kids. She was worried, or this person was worried that she will say yes, but not really want to do it. But she did take the long walk. So we revise the goal, revise the solution, and trying to make sure that the neighbor is okay with watching their kids and will increase the number of walks they take. So again, this is just one of many potential examples, but you can break it down here and see the 3 steps in problem solving: identification, solution, implementation. All right, so now you're up. Get out that pad and paper or get those hands on that chat box. This is your first problem. And again, we're going to solve this together. You don't have to shout out any answers into the abyss, but this is a common problem and I want to solve it together. But first, I'm going to give you a few cracks at it. So you wake up, you have a fever. Your blood sugars are higher than normal and you can barely keep any food down. What do you do? We've all felt this body ache. Maybe it's COVID. Oh no, is it COVID-19? We do. We know that we still need to work to keep our blood sugar levels within range, but we know that infections and illness can drive them higher than normal. It's important to eat if you're on medication for diabetes, but if you can't keep any food down, what are you going to do? So any ideas you might have, go ahead and type them in the chat. I'm going to give you a few moments to jot them down to yourself if you're listening to the recording, and I'll share with you some other ways to solve a problem. Again, what I share doesn't make it the right answer for you, but are just some things to take into consideration. So very good recommendation: stay hydrated. Yes, very, very important to stay hydrated. Maybe being more diligent with checking blood sugars. Yes, very important. So yes, very good solutions coming up. Thank you very much for participating. All right, monitoring the blood sugar more often. So here's some other things to keep in mind when we look at what is a common but really undermanaged part of diabetes care, and that is what to do when you're sick. We always look at diabetes care with relationship to changes in our blood glucose or changes in our A1C, but we get sick too. You get the flu, You get infections, and just like anyone else, it can run us down and really just take all of our energy. So with diabetes care, some common recommendations, especially with relationship to hydration, as we already talked about, is try to take fluids, maybe more frequent sips, more regularly throughout the hour, so not a large volume at one time. We talked about checking blood sugar more regularly, taking medication unless directed otherwise. So we still want to take insulin and diabetes medications, even if you're not able to maintain a usual appetite. If we're noticing problems with low blood sugar, sticking with carb containing clear fluids that are easier to digest, things like Jello and Gatorade, can help give you the hydration you need, as well as the added carbohydrate energy to help maintain regular blood sugar. But more importantly, talk with your healthcare provider and know when to call for help. They might have a glucose target in mind. Say, hey, John, if your blood sugar level is consistently above 250, call us for guidance. Or they might have you check for ketone levels if your blood sugar is becoming too elevated and it's causing you to spill ketones into the urine. That is a medical emergency. So again, knowing when to call for help, establishing that sick day plan with your provider is of utmost importance. But I think if I could distill it down into the two big key points when we're not feeling well, is continuing to take your medications and continue to push fluids. Okay, those are the big things to keep in mind. And again, if you are somebody who is checking your blood sugar on a semi-regular basis, if you're not feeling well, it's important to maybe do some additional testing to just ensure that your blood sugar level is not getting too high. Because remember, even if you're not feeling well and you're not taking any food down, your blood sugar levels can remain elevated in view of infection. So it's a common side effect of many illnesses. So it's important that we know how to manage that. There's some good resources here on this CDC website as far as how to additionally manage the flu during sick days. So again, I would encourage you to review that at your own discretion there. So very good. We're getting warmed up. All right. Here's another problem. So I'll let you take a few moments and read the situation on the screen. So again, these are hypothetical scenarios, but maybe scenarios we can all relate to. This particular example is someone who's newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. All right. Want to lose a pound a week. You take insulin, but your provider says if you lose the weight, there's a chance you may not need to stay on insulin. You're reading through this, the family is not really looking forward to what they perceive as changes to their diet. Husband's still eating his Oreo cookies and things like that in front of you, and makes a point that you shouldn't even have a taste of this. So how do you balance your needs with those of the family members, and how do you deal with this kind of family? How do you deal with this kind of support, or what we would say lack of support? So I'll go back and let you finish reading if you need some time. But what are some ways to handle this lack of support? So we'll try our best to do this through our virtual windows here. So type some ideas into the chat and how you would handle this lack of support. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. These are just solutions that we haven't tried yet. So that's the genesis of problem solving. These are just ideas that we haven't tried yet. I hear that remark a lot as far as diabetes meal planning being quantified as rabbit food. You know where that started. I guess rabbits eat a lot of grass. I guess that's how that got its start back in the day. All right, good recommendation there. Keeping diabetes related cookbooks and literature around for people to review. So if we look at it, there's a lot of different ways to approach this particular issue. So if we try a few different ideas, it can get overwhelming when we look at diabetes care. So I would start with just one area at a time and ask for support, whether it's the meal plan, whether it's the medication. Go from that point, one small area at a time, and then try to ask for support in each of those areas. Maybe it's just a matter of having some family members attend the classes to understand the impact of choices on diabetes outcome. You could also maybe start making small changes in the way food is prepared and see if they notice. Or if you're cooking the same general menu for the rest of the family, and limit your portion sizes of, say, some of the starchier foods. So your teenagers are going to need a lot more calories than you might be. So you could still prepare the pastas and the rice and the potatoes and the starchy foods that we know we have to be mindful of with diabetes, but maybe just limit the portion sizes. But the other thing that's helpful in these scenarios is really a little bit of assertiveness training, okay, with I statements and not the you statements. So it's something like, hey, I would appreciate some help and support with this particular area of my care, and not, hey, you are annoying me with the way you're behaving. So focusing on what you might need help with, say, hey, I would like it if you could help me with this particular aspect of my care, and not trying to lay blame. So these are some of the things that might be easier said than done. But when we look at handling a lack of support, really it's trying to help sure the family understands what diabetes is about, how nutrition can play a role, how it's not really rabbit food, it's just awareness of certain types of food choices and challenging some of those misconceptions, but most important of all, speaking up for yourself. Say, hey, this is what's important to me, and this is important for me to be healthy with diabetes care, and I would like a little bit of assistance with that. All right, very good. Next scenario, social situations here. So you're attending a family birthday dinner at your sister's house, who takes pride in her cooking. She's got a special meal planned for you with all types of courses. Most of these foods are dishes that are covered in sauces and gravies and, pretty high in calories. After dinner, your sister personally hands you the dessert tray, insisting that you take some. She says, look, I know several people with diabetes and they eat anything. So what are some ways to handle this type of situation? This is probably one of the more common scenarios that we see in any type of social setting with regards to food. I mean, let's face it, majority of social settings, there's food there, and people are very personal with their foods, especially if they have prepared it. And as a guest or as an attendee of these events, sometimes we feel compelled where we have to take a little bit of everything so we're not upsetting anyone's feelings. And that can make managing diabetes a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging, because as we know, oftentimes if we're looking at dishes that are high in calories because they're covered with sauces and gravies, it might make sticking to a meal plan a little bit more difficult. So some things to consider. All right. So, saying you're stuffed and take a doggy bag home with you, that's a great idea. Some other things to consider here, not taking seconds, limiting maybe the more obvious high sugar, high fat foods, maybe taking that dessert. All right. So look, she did push the dessert tray right in front of me, so I will take one. She doesn't have to watch me eat it, or maybe I'll just sneak it back onto the tray or onto the table later on, or just have a small amount, a taste, just to give the perception, or just take a walk after eating. If you're going to be around family that's very pushy about certain types of foods and resisting can be futile, maybe getting out, taking a walk after eating so you're not really tempted or guilted, so to speak, to take some of those types of food choices. But some other ways to really manage some of these special events, and I'm sure many of you have heard some of these tricks before when we talk about what else to do, is, if we're talking about a potluck dinner, you can bring your own dish that something more closely meets your nutrition needs, and make that the dominant feature of your particular meal. You can talk to your family about the types of foods you prefer, or how they can be most supportive. And if you are taking leftovers home, just be careful that it's not going to lead to overindulgence. You can take the leftovers home and just discard it, just to make people feel like you had some of their good old fashioned homemade mac and cheese, but you didn't have so much where it's going to drive your blood sugar or your blood pressure up. So again, you get the kind of the best of both worlds there. So very good. So yeah, if you cut up the dessert and move it around on your plate, it looks like you ate some. I do this with my mother-in-law all the time. I assume you're talking about the dessert and not cutting up your mother-in-law, but all kidding aside, that is a great idea, great strategy. So very, very good. Thank you for sharing that. All right, one more scenario here, then we're going to talk a little bit about goal setting and the end of the program steps to make sure that everyone here in attendance gets the points they so decidedly deserve. So last scenario, the holidays. I already see Halloween decorations up. It's scary, but it's just right around the corner. Who knew? So you feel good about the way you've been caring for your diabetes. You want to keep doing well, but the holidays are coming. And you know that both your schedule and your meals will be different. What do we do now? What is your plan for the holidays? How are you going to get through that season of food and friends and more food and more food? So a couple of more obvious solutions here. Again, there's always more than one right answer. For me, I try to check my blood sugar or be a little bit more mindful of it more often. I wear a continuous glucose monitor, so I'm just checking it all the time anyway. But being more aware of your blood sugar, checking it a little bit more frequently, that might be something indicated for you. If your time is limited for structured exercise, can't make it to the yoga classes or the fitness class that you set up for, just increase your daily activity. Remember, getting up and moving around is really all we want to try to do for physical activity. So it doesn't have to be part of a structured class. If you're increasing your daily activity, it's just as therapeutic as if it were a structured exercise class. And that's also a good segue into just scheduling time for that self-care. Holidays are very stressful. So even without the food choices potentially driving blood sugar up, the stress can also make managing our blood sugar a little bit more difficult. So schedule small times for that self-care in advance. When I say small times, just as small as 10 minutes can go a long way. And really remind yourself that it's not cheating. So if you had a piece of cheesecake, it's not cheating. It's a choice you made. Okay. And if it's a choice that's going to help you feel good and things didn't go as planned today, we'll try again tomorrow. But there's no such thing as cheating. It's just a choice that you are making. And I think when we look at all of these goals, whether it's for physical activity and for nutrition and for medication, we know what we want to do. We know what we're trying to do. Do not beat yourself up if you're not able to hit that particular goal, because the research shows that can be even more damaging. Oh, I'm a failure. I'm not following the meal plan as I'm supposed to. I'm not getting the activity that I need. It's just, what's the use? I'm a failure. It's not working for me. Don't do that. We're going to set realistic goals for yourself. And if it doesn't go as planned, we adjust, just like problem solving in general. If that solution that you tried isn't working, see what else might work, but don't beat yourself up, because what we look at when we look at healthy eating goals, healthy activity goals, the more we educate people on what they should be, the more they feel they have to attain it or they're a failure. And that is absolutely 100% not the case. So do not beat yourself up, but instead take a step back, look and see how we can improve upon that for next time. So some good advice here. If with the family for the holiday, take a walk around the yard. We were gathering after eating. Limit yourself to just one round of food choices. So that's great. So yes, great advice. But remember, more important than anything is setting some realistic goals and giving yourself some slack. So one of the things we often do with other diabetes programs is do a real quick commercial on goal setting. So I think some of you are pretty familiar with this acronym for SMART goals, but if you're not, you can see it pretty quickly summarized there, what the SMART actually refers to. Any goal that you're setting for diabetes self-management We want to make sure that it's specific, it's measurable, it's attainable, it's relevant, and it's timely. But I think to simplify it even further, we just want it to be not vague. All right. Something that you can look back and say, hey, I did that. Okay. Your goal is not going to be something, hey, you know what I want to do is I want to breathe more air. No, we don't have any way to measure that. All right. Maybe your goal is something like, well, I want to eat more non-starchy vegetables. Okay. That's a great goal. But in order to understand whether or not you did it, we have to quantify it in something a little bit more specific. So here on the screen, you see an example of a non-specific goal or a non-quote unquote smart goal, and then translated into something a little bit more specific and measurable. So eating a salad with dinner twice a week, packing carrots or celery sticks in your lunch each day, or cutting up vegetables for snacks once per week. So you can see the difference. Both areas are getting you to eat more non-starchy vegetables, which is what the initial goal was. It's just that the SMART goal format is a little bit more specific there. Okay. Here's another example. I want to be more active. All right. Great. That's fantastic. I'm proud of you for wanting to be more active, but let's quantify it into something a little bit more specific and measurable. So taking a 10-minute walk after lunch and dinner 5 days a week, or going for a 30-minute bike ride every Saturday and Sunday morning, or registering and training for a local 5K. So very good. So also some good advice there in the chat. So thank you for sharing, Pat, and I appreciate that. And again, when we look at goal setting in general, we look at where you are with your diabetes care. Are you at the A1C target that you'd like to be at? Is your blood pressure where you'd like to be? And if not, this is how we apply problem solving. So what is the problem? Well, my A1C isn't where I'd like for it to be. What are the potential solutions? So we can look at activity, we look at medication, we look at nutrition, and then from those broader categories, trying to pick more specific goals that you can look back and say, okay, yes, let's try this out and see how it worked. Okay. I want to be more active. All right. Well, we made that a SMART goal by doing a 10-minute walk 5 days a week. We look back and realize that, you know what? After lunch and dinner, it's so darn hot that goal did not work. Go back to the drawing board. Okay. Maybe I go for a 30-minute bike ride instead on Saturday and Sunday mornings before the sun gets up to peak, fry us full sun. So again, ideas, understand that your first solution may not be the best solution for you when it looks to be diabetes related. All right. Whoops, I lost everything there. Let me go back to my last slide here and open it up for questions here. All right. Well, look at that. I've done this a million times. We'll just fast forward all the way to the end. So if you wanted to see what this class was like on fast forward, you're welcome. So here it is. So if you look at the end of this program, we want to make sure that everyone who's in the Gator Care family gets their 100 points. You should see those on your profile in about 2 to 3 weeks. You are going to get a post test. Now, don't stress out. This isn't a arduous exam. This is just a multiple choice quiz that covers everything that we've covered over the past 6 lessons. It is open book, but this is the way that we are going to capture your information in terms of getting you the points. There's also going to be a separate anonymous post-program survey. So it's anonymous, so you can just tell us anything you want that might be helpful, other programs we can offer, anything as far as feedback related to this program, as well as how you're able to apply some of the information in this particular session. It's often a challenge doing these things virtually, so we try to do the best we can given some of the virtual limitations here. But again, I have 2 different survey options for you. So the anonymous general post-program survey, and then the post-test, which is how we gather your information for points. We also, as you know, have all these sessions recorded online on the bridge at UF Jacksonville or on YouTube. Also available for one-on-one visits at no copay for individualized guidance. Some of you have booked appointments already, so we got those on our calendar. And again, any questions, that I can help with as it relates to diabetes care. Maybe you have some ideas that you're not sure if it's going to be the best for you as it relates to getting your A1C level within range or activity level where it needs to be, or maybe you saw a strange nutrition plan and wondering if it's right for you. That's what we're here for. We're here to help and offer guidance and help along the way. So thank you very much. I will stop the recording now and hang out in the chat. If anything comes up, feel free to type it in there.